Hello fiber friends, welcome to another Tuesday tutorial. I have completed this spin and I want to show you the difference that wet finishing and thwacking your hand spun yarn can have. And since I have two skeins of the same style and fiber content, I'm going to wet finish one and then we'll have it to compare with the one that isn't wet finished. The orange stripe in this yarn is a merino 100% wool comb top that I got from Kamaj Fiber Arts, and the white, and it does have some stripes of blue in there. The other stripe, I should say, is from Blue Moon Fiber Arts. It is Polworth, Yearling Mohair, and Tussa Silk. So that's a very luxurious fiber blend. Okay, let's get busy. Let's see how this turns out. So here we have just a plain old bowl of water. I'm going to open up one of these skeins and then set it down into the water. I'll press it down to make sure that it is getting all covered and thoroughly saturated with water. And then I'm going to let it sit in the water. I want to be careful not to agitate it, of course, because that would cause it to felt. The wool and mohair fibers are not just a flat surface. There's actually a cuticle covering the shaft of the wool. If you look closely, you'll see there are some bubbles coming up. That means that the cuticle of the wool is opening up and the water is getting in where it needs to be. It's been about 40 minutes that this yarn has been soaking in the water, and I'm pretty sure it's thoroughly saturated. When working with wet yarn, you never want to wring the yarn out. The fact that the wool is fully saturated with water makes it fragile, and wringing the yarn with a very harsh twisting motion can damage those fibers. So I'm going to squeeze some of the water out very gently. I'm just giving it just a gentle squeeze. Okay, and then I'll set it on my towel. And now I'm just going to roll up the towel so that I can press any other water from the fiber very gently. One good question that people have is, should I use soap when I am wet finishing my yarn? And that's a great question. Generally, unless it's a fleece I was working from raw that I feel might have some more lanolin or some more dirt that got knocked loose when it was being spun, or if it's something that I dyed myself that I think possibly there's just extra dye stuck to it that might need to get washed off, I would use soap in those instances. Of course, something that is meant to wash wool. But otherwise, this is fully processed, combed top, hand-painted roving. There was no issue with any excess dye or anything like that, so I didn't add any soap to this water. I could leave it at this point, thwack it and let it dry, but if you have one of these handy, it's a great tool to use. It will get all those last bits of water out of your fiber, and that is a salad spinner. So I'm going to throw the yarn into my salad spinner, give it a good spin, and get all the last bits of moisture out that I can. And that just helps speed up the drying process because I'm impatient and I want to see what this is going to look like. So I'll just set it down in there. If you look into the salad spinner, you can see there's still a lot of moisture that it was able to remove. So that, like I said, helps speed up the drying process. And now we're ready to thwack the yarn. Everything's lined up the way it should be. Here it is. And I have used all kinds of surfaces for thwacking yarn. I've used the edge of a door frame, I've used my tub, the sink, a counter, and something that I found works is I have these orange leather chairs, and they work great for thwacking yarn. So the way we do this is to grab the skein of yarn and swing it around and thwack it on the chair. That's it. We're just gonna give it a thwack. I want to make sure that I thwack all the way around the whole skein. So I'm going to scoot it a little bit in my hand, hold the next section, and give it another thwack. That was weak. That was better. And I'll scoot it another couple inches and give it another thwack. Now, if you are finishing something that's like a fine wool, lace weight, silk, you wouldn't want to thwack it this hard. And this is where the question of should I finish my yarn comes up, because it really does depend on the construction of the yarn and the fiber content. I'm thwacking this pretty hard because of the mohair content. I've worked with mohair before, and I know that if I give it a good thwack, it's going to give me a good bloom. So that's why I'm hitting it so hard, but it's also a little satisfying. So yeah, let's finish thwacking this. If you have any pent-up aggression or rage, this is a really good craft to get that out with. And I'm just about done. Okay, I've come back to the point where I tied my yarn off, and I know that I've made a full circle and it's been beaten up evenly all the way around. So next, I'm going to hang this up to dry, and we'll come back tomorrow. Of course, it won't feel like tomorrow to you, but I have to wait for a whole day to see my results, but they should be stunning. So I'll see you back in a few. The results are in. The yarn that I wet finished is completely dry, and now we're able to compare it to the yarn that was not wet finished and see what happens when you wet finish and thwack your yarn. One of the things I noticed right away that's a little difficult to show on camera is the handle of the yarn, how it feels. And the yarn that was wet finished and thwacked feels so much more lofty. It's a fluffy yarn. And actually I'm a little surprised by this because initially I thought that it had a lot of drape. I was expecting it to have drape because of the silk and mohair in it, but it really has fluffed up quite a lot. And I had originally wanted to knit with this yarn, then because of the drape factor in it, I thought I'm going to weave with this yarn, but now I'm leaning back towards a knitting project, so I don't know. Leave a comment down below and let me know, what would you do with this yarn? What kind of a project would you like to see this yarn in? I'll give you a little spoiler if you're thinking of ideas or projects to suggest for this yarn. This yarn has a sister skein. There's a third skein. This one is just the orange merino and it goes together. It's beautiful. This yarn will be featured in a video next Tuesday, so make sure you're subscribed so that you don't miss a single tutorial. Okay, I'll put this aside for now. Let's focus on these. So what were some other things I noticed when I was observing the effects of the wet finishing on this yarn? Well, because the drape has diminished by a lot and it's a lot more lofty now, as you can guess, the yarn actually shrunk from the length that it was in the skein. This is something that's a very serious concern. If you wet finish your yarn and it floofs up so that it shrinks, you have just changed your yardage. Oh my goodness. This is why I always reskein my yarn after wet finishing. I do not trust the initial yardage to be the actual yardage I have. This is especially important if you're planning for a project and you're going to play yarn chicken, which I love to do. Watch out, because your yardage can change. And finally, because it fluffed up so much, the wraps per inch also changed. So I got out my yarn gauge and calculated to figure out that the yarn that was wet finished ended up with about 9 wraps per inch, which is a perfect worsted weight yarn. But before it was wet finished, what did I have? 13 wraps per inch. I lost 4 wraps per inch. That's how much it fluffed up. So again, if you're doing a project where gauge matters, you really need to wet finish that yarn before putting it into a project, or your gauge and your final project can be all over the place with unexpected results, and we don't want that. Please give this video a thumbs up to show your support if you've enjoyed my tutorial, and I hope to see you again soon in a live stream or another Tuesday tutorial. See you next time, and happy spinning!